Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today. We will get started in just a minute. In the meantime, feel free to network in the chat and test it out. We'll be right back. Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Building a Branded House, How Florida Tech Invests in Institutional Identity, sponsored by LITHO and Florida Institute of Technology. My name is Alexandra, and I'm part of the AMA team. I wanted to point out that there is a Q&A box that you can put questions in throughout the presentation, and we will make sure to get to those at the end of the session. You can also participate and network in the chat box. Just make sure to put those questions to ask the speakers in that Q&A section. The session will be recorded and available for on-demand viewing right here on this platform. You'll receive an email within 24 hours with a link to access the content on demand, but you're already in this event platform, and that's where the recording will live, and it should be up within 24 hours. I'm very excited to introduce to you today's session speakers, Christena Callahan, Director of Creative Services and Brand Management at Florida Institute of Technology, and Brittany Pace, VP of Customer Experience at LITHO. Welcome, Christena and Brittany. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Alex. Hey, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with Christena today. Thank you to the AMA for having us here. I think everyone is going to have some really tactical takeaways and inspiration that you're going to leave with today. My name is Brittany Pace. As introduced, I'm the VP of Customer Experience at LITHO. LITHO is a creative operations platform for marketing, creative, and content teams, anyone who's obsessed with the creation and orchestration and distribution and compliance of incredible content. And that content being on brand and making sure that content delivers results. So speaking of on brand, it is my honor to introduce Christena Callahan, the Director of Creative Services and Brand Management at Florida Tech. Hey, Christena.
Hey, Brittany. Thank you.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here. And as Alexandra said, please, if you do have questions, add them to the chat, add them to the Q&A. We want to make sure we're able to get to as many of them as possible. We're going to take Q&A at the very end of this session. So let's go ahead and get started. On today's agenda, Christena is going to walk us through a masterclass in brand creation and alignment. We're going to hear about Florida Tech's decision to rebrand and how they made that decision, how she's crafted a brand that instills unity and alignment across campus, and how her team practices what they preach with the processes that they've created.
So great. I wanted to start off by first introducing everyone to Florida Tech, Florida Institute of Technology. We are a private technological university on Florida's Space Coast. So we're about 45 minutes south of NASA's Kennedy Space Center. And in fact, we were founded the same year as NASA in 1958 to provide continuing education and advanced education opportunities to engineers and technicians working at the Space Center. Today, we offer more than 150 bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs in engineering and science, computing, aeronautics, business, psychology, and other disciplines. We have about 4,500 students on our Melbourne campus, and then about an additional 4,500 other students on off-site and online programs.
That's great. And I always love, learning a little bit about the university, and you've been so gracious to allow us to take a peek behind the curtain at how you operate. So being able to see the structure of your Marcom team, I thought would be really interesting for the audience.
Yes, so we are a centralized marketing and communications team. We serve the whole university, and we're under the umbrella of external affairs. Our marketing unit involves 3 offices. So creative services, that's the team I lead. We're a team of 4 responsible for all the graphic design services, both print and digital, photography, brand management, and that includes review of licensed products as well. Our marketing team is a staff of 5, and that they're responsible for recruitment, publication development, and writing, brand strategy, social media channels, SEO, paid search, and the like. And then our web services team is a team of 5 that covers web development and design, web accessibility, and web content editor training. So to give you a peek at the kinds of work that we do, our creative services team, as I said, we're centralized for the whole university. So we're doing work, everything from primarily our marketing team and our recruitment efforts, but we're also doing work for alumni affairs, for student activities, for campus dining, for various administrative and academic units on campus. Types of work include recruitment publications, magazine and newsletters, campus event materials as shown here, as well as university advertising, digital assets, which include social media, email, campus displays, digital displays, and day-to-day business materials like forms, campus maps, decals, giveaways, and the like.
So, I mean, you guys are doing it all. Like literally, there's probably nothing that you're not touching that's not going through your centralized team, which is, I mean, incredible that you're able to support the breadth and depth of all of these requests. And so I think, as we were talking through what was really exceptional about the brand you've built, we thought it would be interesting to start first with a little bit of a history of how you have built this branded house at Florida Tech.
Right. So in 2018, we embarked on a rebrand initiative. So we were coming up on celebrating our 60th anniversary, and we really wanted to revitalize the brand, strengthen our overall reputation, and increase our visibility among key audiences, including prospective students and community partners. So the first step to that effort was let me back up for a second. I'm jumping ahead of myself. On to the next slide, like you were showing. Thanks, Brittany. In combination with looking at that rebrand, our visual identity was starting to feel a little bit dated. Our logo included our university seal. It had a lot of fine details, delicate typography. It was problematic in certain applications, really small scale digital applications. Having that recognition and visibility for people learning about us at a glance. And we also had a mixed use of our name, our formal name, Florida Institute of Technology, and our nicknames, FIT and Florida Tech, and how all of those were working together and used as we presented ourselves to the audience. So as I was starting to say, we jumped into an extensive research phase to kind of see where we are and see what our audience and our constituents thought about us. And that involved one-on-one interviews, focus groups, surveys, a communication audit, both of our internal materials and some peer benchmarking. And we used all of that data to help us identify key strengths and values as identified by our constituents, and points of pride and differentiation, and kind of come to a conclusion about our naming conventions. How should we be presenting ourselves? What's our strongest foot forward? So
I was gonna jump in and say what I love about the approach that you guys took is that it really created this opportunity for buy-in. I think, touching a rebrand and pursuing a rebrand can feel like an incredibly large endeavor. And you and your team could be doing all of this work only to have it fall flat for the rest of the university and your constituents, the alumni, the professors, the students. And so I love that as a part of this process, you started with these interviews, you started with your stakeholders, and what you did is you created buy-in and awareness along the way, that led you to, again, these key strengths and values and the eventuality of what you created. So I'm sorry to jump in there, but it's just something that I thought was truly remarkable and worth emulating if you are going to pursue a rebrand at your institution. Building in that buy-in from the very beginning is so key.
Yes, that's a great point, Brittany, and thank you for bringing it up. I'm going to touch on it again when I talk about our rollout in a couple of slides, but we took all of this research material, all of these data points, and combined them to develop our brand platform that is the relentless pursuit of greatness. So the way we use this, it's not a slogan, it's not a tagline, it's the idea that drives everything we do, who we are, what we do, how we do it, and it's the foundation for all of our strategic communication. So the inspiration point that's driving our messages and our visual identity. And with this foundation in place, the relentless pursuit of greatness, we also embarked on a visual identity overhaul. You can see our revised mark here. It's a clean, modern word mark with an integrated orbit and starburst. So this logo both honors our past and signifies our strong push into the future. The orbit and the star are giving a nod to the university seal, the seal that we still use and adorns diplomas and high-level presidential communications. And it's also an homage to our motto, which is "To the stars through science." It conveys a sense of momentum, which is tapping back into that idea of pursuit, our pursuit of greatness and giving that energy and motion. And I'm really proud of the simplicity of this mark and yet the robust storytelling of the brand platform that it can convey.
It's absolutely stunning. And I love the description that goes into it because these logos aren't just logos, right? There's so much meaning that gets packed into them. And it's just beautiful to see and hear you describe it.
Thank you.
Okay.
So as we developed all that, the next step was launch. And so our launch took place over the course of 18 to 24 months. So as you mentioned earlier with the buy-in, the community, our whole campus community was aware of this initiative. People knew this was in the works, knew that research had been going on. And the first step in kind of the rollout was an announcement from the president and a kind of preview email saying things are on the horizon, we're about to launch, and kind of initiating people to start thinking about, what assets they have, what's going to need to be replaced, what can maybe be paused, what potentially is retired entirely. And the big unveil happened at our State of the University address. We had a video component introducing the brand, explaining the principles behind it. We had giveaways of swag, a lot of excitement, things to get people on board. And after that kind of internal rollout where we got everyone excited and on board with what's happening, we started our public rollout. The first things were obviously our website, all digital assets, our marketing materials that are produced on an annual basis. Those were all planned and we got those launched right away. And then as budget, we were very conscientious about fiscal responsibility. So it didn't come through as just a clean sweep of wipe out every piece of retired branding that potentially existed across our campus. It was kind of cataloged and a defined timeline. So the easiest parts were attacked as quickly as possible. And then the most costly items, those were the last phase of the launch. And that included like our campus monument signs and really big structural changes.
I love this phased approach and so intentional along the way, balancing all of your priorities and driving as much engagement and evolution as possible in a thoughtful way that's not going to make your finance office completely, pull out their hair by the costs of a rebrand. So incredibly intentionally thoughtful here. And one of the things, as we looked at all of the resources that you guys have put together around this brand and this this new rollout, one of the things that really struck us was the toolbox that you put into place. And we're going to talk a lot about this toolbox. This is actually available if you guys Google Florida Tech brand. You can access this. This is public. Christina has given us permission to share it with you all. But there are a couple of quotes that really speak to the intentionality of this rebrand across the organization that we just thought were so powerful and worth sharing here as a takeaway as you look at the slides after this session, and really speak to the amount of resources and investment that a rebrand is, that a brand is for a university. And the fact that pulling it all together under this umbrella, which we'll talk about how you were able to do, Christina, means that you're really also saying we're going to stop with our micro branding efforts, right? All of these individual initiatives should no longer have their own brand, their own marks, because what that does is it starts to dilute the institutional identity and the investment that we've made across the rebrand. So we thought this was just a really incredible and powerful quote here. And then you go on to say, and this is really the premise of why we're all, on this topic today, is that we have to start thinking about Florida Tech as not as a house of brands, not as a multifaceted institution, but rather a singular branded house. So let's talk about how you guys achieved this type of unification.
Right. So exactly. One of the first parts is marketing as a resource and providing the tools to help everyone become a brand ambassador. So our toolbox is put together really intentionally with a lot of things that people can use to present the university and its best facing forward from the first step, as well as downloadables for self-service items, requests for materials that we can provide for them, guidelines for everything for organizing email signatures to starting to plan events, and a robust section on our visual identity standards and how we're using our visual identity. When we come to the next slide, I kind of talk about what you were just touching on with the idea of the branded house. Is we use this opportunity as kind of a reboot to get everyone excited about the Florida Tech identity, re-energize everyone around expectations and get people on the same page about how we're presenting our university to the world. We wanted to raise the profile of our university as a whole. We want to build awareness of Florida Tech first, and recognition of our entire university. And so one of the key components that we're using for that is thinking about visual hierarchy and sharing that with our campus community. So we do offer subunit logos to colleges and schools, research labs, service units around campus, like the Alumni Association, like campus dining, where they need to be indicating the particular unit that they are, but we still want to make sure that we're saying Florida Tech first, and there's not a unique look to the items that are coming from any particular subgroup. So we created these parameters for building the hierarchy. This is our primary logo using the stacked version of our logo. We've got guidelines for how the subunit text is applied to that design. It's not greater than double the width of the logo, not greater than double the height of the logo. So we have this version, and then we also have on the next slide an alternate version when space considerations are a problem. And we have a lot of information in the toolbox that kind of gets people on board with these requirements and with the available options that can help them do what they need to do while still observing the Florida Tech first ideology. On the next slide, we have a couple of examples of how this is put into practice. So on t-shirts, for example, they might have an affinity fun design on the back. On the front, it's going to be the Florida Tech subunit logo. It's how we might use signage, banners, or displays within labs or within areas of campus if they want to be highlighting that lab name, vouchers, passes for the dining hall. It still applies to Florida Tech as a whole, but we're indicating specifically this is about dining. Another component of the revised visual identity was looking at our color palette. So our primary colors are crimson and gold, but we also introduced a palette of accent colors to help us add some liveliness and some depth and address different communication needs in different audiences. So the colors complement the primary scheme, the crimson and the gold, but they're also addressing components of the Florida Tech experience. So for example, the deep purples of space, the deep blues of the marine environment, the yellows and oranges of our sunny Florida location. And we've aligned these into both a vibrant palette on the left and a subtle palette on the right. So this vibrant palette might be used when we're speaking to a high school aged audience in a recruiting material. It's exciting. And has vibrancy. But if it needs to be a little more subdued, we want to create a level of prestige around a document, such as a donor newsletter, we might use the subtle palette. And that's kind of an example of speaking among the audiences, all ages, having brand ambassadors across all the generations. We also apply this principle in the use of our brand photography that we showcase on the next page. So being really intentional about that, applying gels in background lighting, like this isn't just everyday things are happening on campus. We're going and snapping pictures. These types of imagery are really intentional, like once a year or once every couple of years, like major photo overhauls where we're putting a lot of investment into capturing the imagery.
I love this approach. I just think there's something so unique, right, about higher ed marketing and the need to talk and connect with every single generation. From Gen Z, to the boomer generation, you're really creating materials and speaking and attracting and exciting each one of those individual members of your community. And so I love the thoughtfulness around the color palettes, how that can connect, that can speak to these audiences. And as you said so beautifully, create these brand ambassadors for this new brand that you've created.
So we also try to offer as many self-service assets as possible. This is an area we're still working in, but we do have our logo downloads available in the toolbox. We have a variety of photo galleries, general use imagery that people can use in presentations or websites as needed, presentation templates, digital backgrounds for Zoom meetings, wallpapers for phones, research templates. There's a lot of tools that people can download and use and build themselves.
I love that also, because this toolbox that you put together, again, that idea of self-service, you're making it so easy for people to get what they need and stay on brand. I actually see a lot of questions already coming in on how you've been able to achieve this. So this is a part of that answer. But it really goes so much further into the processes that you've also created for your team and for your stakeholders. So talk us through some of those processes and the origin of them.
Yes, so at the same time that we were launching this rebrand, we also launched our use of the Litho workflow and DAM tools. Everything that needs a creative services finesse, it comes through our request process. So at the top of the toolbox, there's a big button for service requests. It's in our email signatures. It's inline text in a bunch of the pages where they submit a service request, work for web services, work for creative services. It all goes through that platform. There's a couple of different request forms based on what they need. And our user can choose the form they want and then choose the project that they're talking about. And based on their choices in these forms, it kind of drills down into additional questions we ask them about what they need in terms of dimensions, in terms of how it's going to be used, where it's going to be used, what information can they provide to us? Do they have assets in mind? It's a pretty thorough form to get as much information up front about how we can start a project. And then if we have to follow up, there's fewer questions. We're kind of on the same page about what they're seeking, and we can answer accurately about time frame, expectations. It's really important to us that people fill out that form and go through those steps on their own, that they take the initiative to fill out the form because of this transparency that they have in the system. So once we've accepted a project, they have a view of this screen throughout the project. They can see the tag that you see with the arrow there, what status it's on. Is it still to do? Is it in internal review? Is it on proof? Which would mean it's in their court and they need to be taking action. There's a timeline at the top from created to complete. And then when it is complete, that central deliverables screen holds all the assets, and they can refer back to that if they perhaps miss an email notification. They always have that centralized hub to find any work related to our working with them, and it's been really helpful. So another part of the system, we give every project a job number, and then every file is labeled with that job number, and any print piece has that job number in small print on the back or in the bottom corner. That is so that if someone finds something on a coffee table around campus, they like the look of it, they want to ask us about it or use it as inspiration for a future piece, they can refer us to the job number. Perhaps the language someone uses to describe a project is not the same language that someone else used when they initiated the request. So building in those job numbers helps us find things regardless of if it was called, town hall flyer or State of the Union meeting notice. And they have, within the toolbox, they're seeing that number about their work. They're getting files that have that number as part of the file name, and then they're getting deliverables that are printed that have that job number printed on them as well. On our side of the process, this screen is an example of like the worker side versus the front end client side. And we can really be cataloging the tasks associated with any project and involving multiple team members in the same project. Listing all the individual tasks that might be associated with it. This screenshot is an example of our magazine. So, obviously that's going to be a multitask project with a lot of different moving parts. We can track the production schedule. We can track digital tasks related to the back end, post-production, distributing it around campus, any freelancers or purchasing tasks that we used, tracking materials there, saving files there. And it's a really great resource to have a one-stop location to pull up any of that historic data about a project with a few clicks of a button. We also do our proofing through the system. So we have an internal review process and an external review process. Internal would be amongst creative services staff. So making sure that things are applying to our graphic identity principles, following our writing style guide. Everything is tight with logo placement. Everything is, proper language is used. That's one side where we're working back and forth amongst ourselves. And then we'll create a separate proofing process, working back and forth with the client. So any of our internal communications about what should be on a project isn't visible on the other side, so that we can be kind of maybe debating decisions, making comments in there, and then a fresh version goes to the client, and then they can be making comments. We can go back and forth. We can add replies, get clarification. Another great element of this environment is the opportunity for versioning and for comparison. So every time there's a new proof that's created, it's layered on top of the previous. So a client can go back, double check the previous, were my changes that I requested made, look at things side by side. And the whole history of communication about a project is cataloged and layered there so that you just have that transparency of the whole process of a project. And it's not a matter of like one component might be in one person's email inbox, one component might be in another person's email inbox. We have a really robust track of everything associated with the project.
That's great. I think one of the other things, as we were talking about the value of proofing in this collaboration and line is if someone is requesting something that is just completely off the charts or something that you guys would not want to accommodate, having all of your brand guides in that toolbox clearly spelled out has helped also set some parameters around what you will and will not do, because you can accept a request and do, fulfill a service, but you're not going to take every single piece of feedback, right, from that stakeholder. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit about some of those back and forth of when a stakeholder goes out of bounds, how you handle it.
Yeah, it's a great just having those guidelines published and accessible and referenceable is really valuable and helps us redirect clients or redirect expectations by saying, well, what you're asking for isn't really within the bounds of the brand, but here's an alternative, or here's where you can read more about why we have these, guidelines. This is what we're covering. And it just gives it like a level of authority that sometimes people might be unwilling to hear just you speak. But when they read it published in the toolbox, they gather the gravity of it and they're more willing to comply.
Yeah, it's not a no just for the sake of a no, right? It doesn't make you more difficult to work with. There's like a reason and a purpose, and you're kind of taking the emotion out of it, which is nice too.
Exactly. So another tool that's so helpful to us about this platform is how we tag our projects. There's a lot of tags. We apply many levels of tags. These were generated, specific to us based on our workflows, but for audit reporting, for example, can you provide one copy of all advertising issued on behalf of the institution during the current academic year? I imagine others, you get requests like this for reporting or auditing or compliance requests on an annual basis. So we can do that really quickly by using tags by deliverable. We can search all digital ads. We can search all print ads within a date span, generate that list right away, pull examples of those assets right away. And it's not a cumbersome process. Another example is resource allocation. So we have tags by client. Which client had the highest request count last year? We can search by the different types of clients and maybe identify if the workload in one area is starting to grow and address, how we might accommodate that. Do they need more self-service assets? Do we need additional staff members to be looking at pieces of this workflow? And just for general quick reference, I imagine others have probably had situations like this where, we have a promotional opportunity, but the deadline is tomorrow. Perhaps you were a sponsor of an event and they didn't realize that there was a program ad component of that sponsorship. What can we send? So we have tags by campaign where we can really quickly search by some of our specific communication campaigns, look at the ad dimensions of existing materials, and 9 times out of 10, we have an asset that already fits that request. So really quickly, a couple of clicks, we can search that information and provide the asset needed on a really timely basis.
Brilliant.
So we use tags on our digital asset management in a little bit different way. It's like a partner platform to our workflow management. And I really love this system because we can just make it as broad or as fine as we need it to be. So we'll tag by college, we'll tag by discipline, we'll tag by pieces of content like lab coat or pipette. We'll tag by smiles. And it helps everyone who's using the asset manager, even if you don't have like a really in-depth, if you weren't the person who uploaded the assets, perhaps you wouldn't have known in a traditional system, which folder those were housed in. It doesn't really matter with this system because you can search kind of those content parameters you're looking for and see assets that are tagged with those labels and know that, perhaps this occurred during a photo shoot for aerospace engineering, but it's a component of our human-centered design activities as well. It would have both of those labels. You could pull it up right away. We sort by date. We sort by 5-star or best if we want to really limit something into like the best images representative of an area. So it helps take this giant photo library that we have and drill down to the really usable assets really quickly, or have a whole variety of options if that's something that you need as well. Another component of this system is we use it for our photo releases. So we can link photo releases to individual students or other models in imagery. It's linked directly to that image. And it also, we can tell if a document has a photo release or not. We also label everything by the student's name or the faculty's name that's in an image. You will see an example of this on the next slide. So that if you're looking for a specific faculty member, for example, we can be searching by their name. Then we can drill down to, do we want a headshot or do we want an environmental portrait? Are we looking for a lab setting? We can find them in that way. If there's a specific student we're looking for, or perhaps we shouldn't, we've been asked not to include those people anymore. We can search for that name, remove all of those assets from the library. Again, with a few clicks, it's been really helpful.
I love the way that you guys have built processes and practices around this. I think everyone, on this call is probably dealing with their own set of compliance questions and constraints. And especially when it comes to student identity, those regulations and new rulings seem to be coming out every year. So, from GDPR compliance, California Consumer Privacy Act, these are really helpful ways that you're able to sleep at night, knowing that you're able to use these students in your promotional materials, but to the extent that it is, allowable, and have a sense of where these assets are, and bring them back when it's time to expire them. So I think this is a brilliant system that you've built here.
Yeah, it's been working really well for us.
So I know you have a couple of things that you're still working on. No journey is ever complete. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you guys are working on in 2024.
Yes, so we're just constantly, refining our processes, refining the workflow, bringing new people into the system. One of our biggest goals is both self-service, templating, and environmental branding around our campus. So we're like tiptoeing in. So I haven't, I couldn't speak more broadly about it for this webinar, but building out our templating opportunities with the Litho Tempo tool. So we have a lot of digital screens throughout our campus. They're part of the internal communication strategy where we're sharing news and information, upcoming event announcements and reminders. It's another outlet to highlight storytelling that we've already done elsewhere. This particular example on the screen right now is a video series that is on our YouTube, and we also share those profiles on the digital screens with a QR code, and people can see those videos if they missed them elsewhere or when they were posted on social media. And by building out the templates, multiple members of our marketing team can be creating the content for these screens. It's not just falling on the designers. We build out the parameters that they have access to switching the content for, dropping in new imagery, really quickly making QR codes. And we have a couple of different ones lined up. So a couple of different event examples, a couple of different, this is a My Pursuit video series example. We have some other news type examples and some other annual campus activities that happen. So we're building out frameworks. So we'll have a library of templates, and then multiple staff members can hop in there, update the content, and get those out to the screens. And it frees up the workload for the design team.
It's so smart. It makes it instantly available. You're confident it's going to stay on brand. And I just want to reinforce something that you said earlier in this session around being able to also pull the reporting that helps you understand what departments or areas that you're creating the most in, because that becomes a really great opportunity for you to say, okay, how do we templatize that or create more opportunities for self-service? This, Litho Tempo is going to exactly help you in those areas because you have the reporting and now you can bring that into action. So these are really cool use cases that you've just shared.
Right. And then another project for the future and goal that we're working on is environmental branding around campus. And that's exploring all the ways that we can be creating that sense of place on the Florida Tech campus beyond just placing the logo, on the wall or in vinyl somewhere. It's looking at the color palette. It's looking at, the framing of imagery. We have a couple of areas on campus that we've been rolling out projects so that we can just have that excitement and have that selfie spots, have, places that people really feel like it's an exciting part of the Florida Tech campus and it's created beyond just using the logo. So that's our goals for the future and something we're kind of moving forward.
It's beautiful. So there are so many questions. I want to get right into them, but first we're going to just give you guys some key takeaways. Hopefully everybody has learned something that they can go out and immediately start doing. But here were a few of the themes that we really heard Christena bubble up. So one is keeping it simple as you're constructing your new brand. Make sure it's legible, make sure it's clear, and make sure you're building it in the constructs that are going to allow you to then build out your new initiatives because you already have that framework in place. As you're thinking about rebranding or marketing initiatives, I love that you took us through the phases of your rollout. So it doesn't all have to happen at one time. You probably don't have the financial, budget to make it all happen at one time. So thinking about the way that you can phase it out from internal communications, building the buy-in, creating those brand ambassador moments, and then moving to the physical signage. And really being intentional also about not everything needs the logo, right? Does every trash can need the logo? Does every toilet paper, receptacle need the logo? Probably not. So being really intentional about how you're spending those financial, that budget that you have to have the biggest brand awareness for your buck. Process is your friend. I think you have shown that to us today in spades. The processes that you've aligned your team around from the initial intake, getting that stakeholder buy-in to fill out those forms, helping them understand what's in it for them, and then helping your team then carry that through. I love the tip about building the job number into all of those assets because then that helps you stay sane as somebody's referring back to something that you've done in the past and you can so quickly pull that up. We talked a little bit about the creation of these brand ambassadors, not just through the buy-in of your initial rebranding, but also by really making it easy to work with you. You are making it easy to request things. It's in your email signature. It's in your brand toolbox. It's everywhere you look. You make it easy to request something. And you're also providing so many self-service templates, resources that are just available. So you can not only avoid that work on your team, but it also makes sure that people are doing what's easy to keep things on brand and carry that forward as your own brand ambassador. So really, thank you so much, Christena, for sharing all of this with us. I am excited to jump into the questions. The tool that Christena has been using is Litho. So we've actually gotten a lot of questions in the chat about what tool you're using for project management, for proofing, for digital asset management, for templating. She's doing all of that with Litho. So if you do want to learn more, you can let us know in the chat, or you can go to our website directly, www.litho.com. So let's go ahead and get into these questions because they are really good. And the one I want to start with is, how do you accomplish all of this with a small team?
So our work management process system is really helpful because we can cut back on some of the time, get to the meat of what people are really seeking. That helps us turn things around quickly. We do put parameters in the turnaround time that can be requested for a project so that people kind of understand how long it takes to do something. So by having all of the fields of our form, they're putting a lot of details about what they're looking for, and they're getting a reliable expectation of when they can expect to get something back. We do have a small team, but it's been really successful so far, just having this system in place and having the transparency of what the workload is in place to get people what they need.
I love it. Let's see. I'm going through some of these questions. So I think maybe a little bit of a recap on an earlier portion of the session. Talk about a little bit the different schools within your university that each had maybe a different branded identity or different organizations. I know you showed examples of the Florida Institute of Technology logo that you guys have retired. Were there other sub logos that had been created in the past that you had to kind of corral and eliminate, so to speak?
So thankfully, it wasn't so much a problem at the college level. We do have 4 colleges: the College of Aeronautics, the BISC College of Business, the College of Engineering and Science, and the College of Psychology and Liberal Arts. Where we saw a lot more of like individual identities happening was at the research lab level. And that can be tricky because sometimes researchers might go from institution to institution, and so they're trying to have an identity for their lab. Based on the parameters that we spelled out in our toolbox, people are mostly receptive to they understand our goal of Florida Tech First. Raising the profile of the university helps everyone, and it kind of builds the prestige for everything under it. So we didn't have a ton. I would say, it was better than it was worse, trying to get people on board, and we don't have a lot of outliers.
That is so nice, and I'm sure everyone is very jealous of you right now. And I think a lot of that also comes with that intentionality of how you framed the rebrand as a institution-wide initiative, the milestone timing of that 60th anniversary, the buy-in from leadership. I think all of those really do go a long way to helping create that change throughout the organization, throughout the university. Besides your Marcom team, did you have a committee for the rebranding with various stakeholders that were part of the process from start to finish? And if so, what were some of the key roles of those individuals?
So we did work with an agency on the rebrand process, and there was a group of, we did have student involvement, alumni involvement, key staff members, key administrators, of course. I don't recall off the top of my head, I can't speak to the specifics of, can you repeat the last part of the question again?
I think the roles of those on your committee that may have been a part of that full rebranding initiative.
Right. So it was primarily from the marketing communications team working in partnership with the agency, and then inviting those other stakeholders in. If they want to send the question to AMA, I could follow up. If there were specific roles in a steering committee, I don't recall off the top of my head.
What about students? Do you recall any students being a part of the process?
Yes, there were students in all the phases, interviews, focus groups, survey participants.
Yeah. So by the time you had revealed that kind of new brand, everyone was, and it just had that buy-in element to it, and you had just
it was not a secret at all that it was going on. The campus community was familiar with it, in varying phases across the research gathering component. So people were aware it was happening, and then everyone was brought back in and got really excited once the reveal came. But when the reveal came, it wasn't like news to people that we had been in the process of beginning a rebrand.
That makes sense. Going a little bit more over to the project management area, what are some of the criteria that you use on how you decide if you're going to take on a project or not?
Well, who it's serving. So if something is very internal, we're looking at the time involved in a project, and we're looking at the exposure of the project. So anything that's forward facing, that's elevating the profile of the university, that's presenting us out into the community, the Marcom team absolutely has to be involved in building that messaging and building that look. If there's something that's an internal initiative that's kind of a smaller nature and it's going to be a big time commitment, then we might have to look at schedules and the level of effort already undertaken by the team and kind of evaluate, well, we could help you with this, but maybe not until next month. So it's typically the first step is looking at where the communication is taking place, if it's out in the community, if it's forward facing versus if it's internal.
That makes total sense. Let's see. Do your designers manage the LIFO digital asset management system, or who manages all of this greatness? That was a direct.
So yes, in our digital asset management, we have 2 admins. So several people on the Marcom team can put assets in there, but it is coming down to 2 admins to kind of review what's going in there to confirm that we do in fact want it to be part of this larger archive, and then confirm the tags on it so that things make sense, that we're not adding new tags when an existing tag already applies. Perhaps in the search for a tag, they created a plural about something, didn't realize there was a singular version. So we'll do tidying there so that when you're searching, it is delivering what you expect. It's kind of just an ongoing, as things are going in there, we're refining all the time, but we have a limit to the number of people who can add assets, and then just a 2-person top tier management team to confirm that everything that goes in is going to be something we can find on the other side.
A few questions about the photo releases that you're doing with the students. Do you get individual photo releases for each student, or are they covered by a blanket university-wide release?
So anytime we're doing a really dedicated marketing photography shoot, we are getting photo releases for those people. If we are featuring individuals, some of the examples that were shown in the preview earlier, where they're very clearly, you can see 2 students working with the chemistry equipment, we do have releases for those students. If we have more candidates of general campus life, we are not getting releases from every individual. We kind of look at it as if it's a public space outdoors, part of general campus life, we consider that generally capturable imagery that's in a public setting. If we are going into indoor spaces, particular classrooms, particular labs, we are making sure that we have the consent of everyone who's participating that day, and we do have a photo release on file, and that we know the names of the students. And then if we ever did need to remove any of those images, we know who they are, and that we do have the consent for the imagery that we're taking indoors.
That's so smart. Okay. I think, let's see. One of the questions was, may we have access to your brand guidelines site or document? So Christina, I don't know if you want to share the easiest way to get to that, because I know it is publicly available.
Yeah, so floridatech.edu/toolbox takes you to our toolbox. And that is where many of the screenshots of what I covered today are, and a lot of the details of our brand guide.
And it's so worth checking out. It really is. It's incredible. How do you handle, you talked a little bit about this, but we're getting a lot of questions around it. How do you handle existing non-compliant brands of units or programs that have been created or just have been established for a number of years? I know, one of the things that I thought as I was talking to you through these sessions is, you get this this image of a brand cop or the brand police coming across the university and pointing out that's not brand, that's not on brand, and what are the punishable offenses of these institutions. Talking with you, it feels like you haven't had to have too many of those moments. Are there any that come to mind that you have had to kind of
Well,
navigate?
I feel like the rebrand exercise as a whole kind of just energized the campus community, and it just was an opportunity to reboot. So many people were excited to get on board with that transition. We do not have the staff to go police, so we do not have anyone who's like wandering campus trying to seek out inaccurate logos and shut them down. As things are brought to our attention, perhaps someone emails, they saw something somewhere, we will then reach out and ask, you know, why it's needed. If there's something posted, can this be replaced? Is this still useful? Is this still, can it be updated, or can it be retired? And we'll kind of have that conversation. So when things are brought to our attention, we start the conversation of improving them. If you walk across our campus today, I want to say you're not going to find anything out of compliance, but it is possible. And then if it's brought to our attention, we do our best to get everything back in order.
I love it. And you talk about it in such like a kind and supportive way, right? That I think nobody could get mad at you for coming after them. And so I think you just have a great approach and thoughtfulness to how you're corralling the university.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
sometimes it just starts with asking what folks are trying to communicate, you know, like what is your need? And then we can help them figure out how to fulfill the need without starting with this is wrong. Start with what's the need, and then kind of work from there.
that's such a great tip. Okay, last question. We have time probably only for one more. You talked a little bit about the templating initiatives that you're going to be taking on this year. Tell us a little bit more, because I know you do have some templates that are available on the toolbox today for various types of documents. How do you keep your stakeholders using them? How do you keep them from breaking them? From breaking the template and the branding? It feels like a constant battle, especially with presentations. So any tips, and what are you templatizing today?
Yes, so any of the tempo template that we showcased right at the end, that is internal for our marketing and communication folks. So everyone who is using those, you know, that's kind of a back end side of templating. Everyone who's using those knows what we're trying to achieve. So thankfully, breakage doesn't happen there. We do have public facing templates that you for presentations, for example. And the way, I mean, a lot of that is locking down what is available. So our building out our master slides and locking those. Many users don't have the savvy to kind of get into that side of things and start making tweaks. Building out the fonts and the color palettes like within that presentation environment, we haven't experienced too many people changing what settings have already been established within the presentation. And again, we kind of operate with, we're giving you the tools to succeed, and we're expecting that everyone's making their best effort to use them as intended and to ask questions if they need help. And we try to operate with, you know, that people are doing the right thing, making the right decisions, and being brand ambassadors to their best ability.
I love it. Help them help themselves. And I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up. So, Alexandra, I think you had one announcement you wanted to make, but thank you so much again to the AMA for having us. And I hope you guys all got as much value out of Christina's masterclass as I did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina and Brittany, for being here today, but also just sharing so much in-depth knowledge with us. Really appreciate it. And thanks to all the attendees for being so engaged and asking so many questions that we weren't able to get to them all. That's a great problem to have. And we'll be sharing the questions with our presenters in case there's any they're able to address. Thank you again to LITHO and Florida Institute of Technology for sponsoring this webinar. As a reminder, the session is available on demand. It probably will be in the next hour or two, but for sure within the next 24 hours. You'll be receiving a link to that, but it is going to be right here on this platform for you guys to enjoy. Before you go, I want to draw your attention to right on the right-hand side of the chat. There is a survey link. If you want to click that and let us know how this went for you, we'd love to hear your feedback. And thank you again for joining us. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Mhm.